Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in. You're watching the VSO Gun Channel, and today I'm going to be yielding to those of you who have been blowing up my inbox for the last several days about the Minneapolis incident. Look, I just got back from SHOT Show. I had a whole bunch of time-sensitive work that had to be completed. And then I went to bed because I am simultaneously rather ill. I have been quarantined in this office since Saturday because my wife is 8 months pregnant. I'm trying not to get her sick at this late stage. My brother might even end up in the hospital at this point in time. He describes it as military-grade crud this year around. So, I have just now finally emerged to the point where I can put together a coherent thought and make a video that doesn't have to be bullet point by bullet point where I'm reading off to you guys, because that's not what actually you want. You guys know me as someone who tries to reason through every take. And to that effect, I'm going to tell you that this is actually going to be a combination video. I'm going to be combining this topic with a story of my worst aviation experience ever on the way home from SHOT Show this year, because quite frankly, I don't think that there's enough meat on this topic to fill an entire video. I understand that there's a rush for everyone to get on some kind of bandwagon. People have a need to get on a team. And whether that's red team good, blue team bad, or vice versa, whatever it is, I consistently reject that system. And those of you who have rushed to jump on a bandwagon may be disappointed with my message here today. And my message here is this. I'm going to introduce you to this graph. Many of you have seen it on this channel before and other places. This is called the Dunning-Kruger graph. This is a qualitative visual representation of how people behave when they don't know anything about a topic. Especially in the age of social media, people have a tendency to feel as though they need to have an opinion and they need to voice that opinion regardless of how well-founded that opinion may be. You will notice, if you decipher that graph, that there is a peak, a trough, and a return. The people who are the loudest and attach themselves rigidly to their positions the most are the people that have the least amount to contribute to the conversation, that have the least experience, the least knowledge. And as you gain competency in those areas, your positions soften. You find yourself in sort of a limbo, and you only return to a level of, yeah, I think I know what I'm talking about, once you've achieved that expert status, once you've acquired a substantial quantity of experience and wisdom on a topic. But it never returns anywhere close to the level of the truly ignorant on the topic. So, what I would say to you today is whether you believe in the mission of ICE or not is irrelevant. The truth of the matter is that we in the United States have a militarized law enforcement problem. The same people today that are saying, woohoo, if we're going to find out, are the same people that yesterday were bitching about the IRS and the ATF killing American citizens over some crap rules that they made up, like the length of their barrel on their gun, or whether they fill it out a piece of paper when they purchase their firearm or something like that. The same people that consistently talk about how evil the government is today for what they're doing are the same people that yesterday were cool with the concept of the government forcing you to take medications that you don't want or you don't think that you need. So, when it comes to the pretty, perceptible pause, good killings, and I use the term killings because when you use the term officer-involved shooting, it has certain connotations for it, and it's very hot and cold. Either somebody believes that that is absolutely murder or that it is entirely justified. And I would say that in both those instances, both of those people were doing something they probably shouldn't have been doing. But it did not rise to the level of them going home in a body bag. So if you are in the camp that this is absolutely murder, then I would put you here on the Dunning-Kruger graph. And if you are the person who believes that this is absolutely justified and we must have more of this, then I would put you here on the Dunning-Kruger graph. You really don't have a whole lot to contribute to the conversation. And now I'm going to talk specifically to red team good, blue team bad for a second. If your position can be perverted into a position that says that people don't have a right to carry a weapon for self-defense to a protest, then you are wrong. Flat and simple. You have abandoned constitutionality. I have never been to a protest that I was unarmed at, and I will never be at a protest where I will go about without the ability to provide for myself and my family. And for the officials and the pundits and everybody else in this administration and the sub apparatus below them to insinuate that your constitutional right to self-defense somehow evaporates because you were in the presence of law enforcement does not work. Now to red team bad, blue team good. Y'all just got done doing this. Just a couple years ago, you guys took the ATF to an airport executive's house at 6 o'clock in the morning and shot him in the face in front of his wife. All over a search warrant, not an arrest warrant, a search warrant because he might have sold a couple of the guns that he bought. You guys presided over the Waco siege where you burned 72 men, women, and children alive in their church. And if we want to rewind that a little bit further, going back to red team good, blue team bad, y'all did Ruby Ridge. Both sides use federal law enforcement for things that the founders of this country never intended for law enforcement to do. The federal government was never meant to have a law enforcement force. It was supposed to be the sheriffs. And until we critically look about the things that the federal government is doing, people want to get hacked off about the Somalians pilfering money and sending it and embezzling it overseas. There should not be billions of dollars to embezzle. The federal government must be shrunk to like 25% of its current volume and expenditures. Until we get there, this kind of stuff is going to happen regardless of what person is in charge or what their agenda is. Because this is something that government was never supposed to be able to do at the point of a gun. There are reasons that the military is forbade from operating inside the United States. And to call it not the military just because it's an agency and it has been delegated by the responsibility of Congress to the executive branch to do these things, that they just made it up one day, does not mean that it is okay or that it is constitutional. And until we unfuck that, you're going to see this in the news every single day. Well, as it turns out, I was able to fill an entire video with that. I didn't think that it was possible to do that. I got a little bit deeper than I thought I was going to. So, the balance. My worst aviation experience ever. So, remember, snowpocalypse is bearing down on us, trying to get out of Vegas. We kept our flights the same because we were scheduled to go from Vegas to D.C. That was a critical error. From D.C. to Columbus, Ohio, which was our airport. I live in a pretty cool spot where I get to choose whether I fly out of Columbus, Pittsburgh, or Cleveland based on the fares. Well, it just so happened that I was traveling with my brother this year, and they live in and about the Columbus area. So it was just easier to do that. Plus, we would get pickup because my sister-in-law would be there too to get us. Anyway, digression. I usually fly the red eye out of Vegas, but for some reason, I didn't check it. Usually, I take a direct red eye from Vegas to Columbus. For some reason, I didn't do that this year. I was just going too fast and didn't pay any attention. Return flight was going through DC. Well, it turns out that at least got us out of Las Vegas, because I was just talking to Rich from Flying Rich, and he is still there. Which the idea of staying in Vegas for an additional 4 days, just absolutely, no, absolutely not. Anyway, so we get on the plane, and for the most part, it starts off good. They basically say, hey, there's going to be some turbulence, whatever, kind of expected, snowstorm, Anyway, the dude that is between my brother and and I don't know if you've noticed or if you've met us in person, we're both rather broad people at the shoulder. And depending on the time of year, the midsection as well. But anyway, we take up a substantial amount of space. So our plan was to get on the plane. It was a United flight, so you pick your seats. And I think that Southwest is going to that anyway. So I really hate that system. So I'm glad that it's going away. But anyway, we get in our seats, and there's a dude between us. He's some kind of writer. And we say, hey, would you like to, we've been rooming together for the last week, would you like to swap your aisle seat or swap your middle seat for either the aisle or the window, right? The guy declines, which sounds to me like it was a pretty good deal. But anyway, that dude clearly Vegased way too hard, right? I remember I was talking to the dude, and like just mid-sentence, he's just like stops, and he's like, yeah, I'm really tired. I haven't really slept this week. And then he just kind of like fades off. And I'm like, all right, cool, whatever. Good for him. Service comes around. Service serves everybody the drinks and the snacks, which, by the way, United's little wafer thing that they do, the waffle, get that thing. You want that in your life. It is most certainly not an RFK approved snack, but doesn't matter. That thing is freaking delicious. Anyway, this dude wakes up, gets his Coke Zero, and proceeds to drink it, and then passes out mid-drinking it. And we're like crammed in there like sardines, like absolutely cannot move. Somehow, he was able to spill his drink on both me and my brother. I think my brother got the cup of ice with the drink, and I got the can. You would think that he got the shorter end of the stick because of the ice and colder and all that sort of stuff, but the can was most of the way full. So the entire can dumped into my lap. So I've got it, basically my pocket's full, my underwear is wet, and basically I felt like I had, by the end of this whole experience, I felt as though I had like liquid bandage caked into the hair of my leg, basically. It was awful. But of course it was an airplane, and things just simply don't dry out in coach on an aircraft. They just don't. So I rode the entire 3.5 hour flight wet. And the dude didn't even like really respond. Like it was like, oh, I'm just sick and tired and I don't know what to do. Anyway, shortly thereafter, a gentleman who also appeared to have Vegased way too hard, who was visibly drunk in the terminal. I saw this dude in the terminal. He could barely stand, was allowed onto the aircraft, and he vomited on an entire row of people. And then proceeded to come back to our lavatory and be violently sick for at least 3 hours. It may have been even longer than that. It was a 3.5 hour flight. So he was in there, and the flight attendant would walk up to the lavatory and be like, hey buddy, you okay? We're deplaning. In there, never saw the guy again, right? But I could hear him. And for his pre-behavior getting onto the plane, because look, I have been blitzed on aircraft before, but never have I ever had a problem like that before. What happened to people who are visibly drunk not being allowed on airplanes? Anyway, I hope he suffered for his previous bid. It sounded like he did. So I think he probably paid his dividends or paid his dues there and got his dividends. So anyway, we land. Dude's still in the bathroom. And instead of deplaning everyone and then cleaning the plane, they decide that they need to surge 10 cleaning staff onto the plane while everybody's trying to deplane. It took 40 minutes to get everybody off that plane. It was an absolute fiasco. And of course, everybody, decided that they needed to bring all of their belongings that they've ever owned and put them in a roller bag, so anyway, I'm bitter about it. Anyway, so we land in DC, which is on my list of top contenders for the worst airports on the planet. Like Mogadishu, LAX, Atlanta. You see where I'm going, right? Anyway, we have to go completely across the airport, which, would have been fine if we had, had gotten off the plane at a reasonable time frame. But because that wasn't the case, we basically had to rush. Then we get there and our flight is delayed. So we rushed across the airport like chickens with their head cuts off to get there and to sit in what I can only describe as the ice box for a half hour. So the ice box is basically, if you've never been to the DC airport before, is a section where the planes are too small because in Washington, D.C., we don't have the technology to bring a jet bridge to a small plane. You have to go out on the tarmac. And because of that, like all 10 gates that are right there with small planes are just doors constantly open. So you've got 8-degree weather that is coming in an already poorly insulated icebox, right? Everybody was cold. We go outside when it's time to get on the plane. And mind you, we're both still wet from Fuckstick dumping his Coke on us. We get on the plane. And of course, same scenario. It's a tiny little aircraft. Everybody decides on this flight that they needed to bring every belonging that they've ever owned in a roller bag that clearly does not fit. So it takes them forever to load the baggage. And for some reason, they've decided that on this particular flight, that the door has to be open to load said luggage because they were concerned about it not being able to fit all in the underside. So they were going to put some of it in the walkway up front, which has to be against federal regulations of some kind. Anyway, another digression. Then they discover that the door won't close. We sat on the tarmac with both doors open, front and aft, creating a wind tunnel in 8-degree weather for 45 minutes. I thought that I was just being a pussy. The dude next to me was visibly quaking. I thought that he was going to go hypothermic and die because I'm considerably beefier of a person. That guy had no insulation on his body whatsoever. He had some nice clothes on and whatever, but he definitely needs to invest in blubber resources. Anyway, we finally take off. And after everybody thaws out, because everybody was clearly awake at that point in time, I hear the dude who was quaking basically say, "Gosh, that was absolutely awful. What is going on with this place right now?" And the dude 2 seats in front of him turns around and he says, "Brother, that's nothing. The dude in my last flight puked all over me, and I had to change my clothes between getting on this flight and my last one." So it had come full circle. And I guess the moral of the story is that no matter what you do, sometimes bad things just happen, and there's nothing you can do about it.